Economic Forum's president talks about India's growth story and much more. Thank you for joining me tonight on this very special newscast, Mr. Borge Brende, the World Economic Forum president. India is chairing the G20 forum this time around. What are your expectations from the Indian presidency of the G20?
India has already really delivered a lot during its G20 presidency. India has underlined the importance of being digitally connected, and the fact that India was the leader of giving a digital ID to 1.4 billion people, and we have seen also all the people that are connected, has inspired other nations. And I think India's G20 presidency also has laid out a path for how we can also in the future connect the 3.5 billion people globally that is not connected like most people in India are today. I also really appreciate that India has taken leadership on sustainability. Really shown that there is a path towards a low-carbon economy, but without losing the baby with the bathwater that is growth and jobs. And the last thing is that reviving global growth is at the core of our challenge, how to avoid a decade of low growth. And India is leading now with 8% growth and is the fastest growing economy in the world. And I think through its G20 presidency, it also has shown that other countries can learn from India, and especially emerging economies and developing countries.
Mr. Brende, the question many people are asking about India is that will it be able to deliver the growth rates that it is currently doing in the face of, a slowdown in the world around it. And so far, we've managed to stay insulated. But will this pace of growth continue? And how does the world really view this economic growth that India is able to display?
I think we are now faced with the so-called snowball effect in India. The snowball starts to roll, and then it rolls faster and faster and gets bigger and bigger. This is not possible to stop. I think that India in the coming decade will become a $10 trillion economy, definitely now the third largest economy in the world, passing Japan and Germany. But India also is operating in a global context. If we are seeing slowing down of all other economies, of course it will have impact on India, but that's already partly the case, and the Indian domestic market is huge. That plays a positive role. I think also the fact that India is better prepared for the new consumption pattern is an important argument in this respect. Because after COVID, we see less of demand for commodities, but more for services. And India is a big country of export of services. And there we are also seeing growth.
Let me also ask you, Mr. Brende, the fact is that many are looking towards this G20 summit in India, a way to somehow look at the geopolitical situation more than they're looking at the economic takeaways, which should be the top priority in a G20 summit of this kind. So my question to you is, so far, a consensus on the joint communique has eluded the G20 member nations. But if it were to be worked out and hammered in over the next few days, what would you want to see in that communique?
So I hope we can rebuild trust, because there is a huge trust deficit globally, also between the G20 countries. And We should think win-win and not lose-lose or that we have a zero-sum game. So I hope that the leaders coming together in New Delhi will say that there are challenges that are traveling without passports, like climate change, future pandemics, where we have to deal with those things together. So rebuilding trust and less geopolitical tension, I think India can play a constructive role here because it also has a huge influence on the so-called swing states, those that are in the global south and thinking that there has to be also opportunities for them and there has to be. Secondly, I would say that we have to do everything to avoid this decade of slow growth. I'm very concerned that with new tariffs and new protectionist measures, we also can see a slowing of the growth because trade has been the engine behind the incredible growth that we have seen the last decade. So I think we need to agree on some principles related to trade. Of course, some nearshoring, some also looking at the supply chains and the more resilience, and the resilience is important, but we have to continue to trade with each other because that is a guarantee for future prosperity.
Absolutely. Nobody can doubt, the economic principles behind that. But what makes India better amongst the equals in Indo-Pacific or the global south? How do you see India's positioning in this region?
India's importance economically is growing very, very fast. So if India is not already the third largest economy in the world, it's very, very close to be so. It is a $3 trillion economy today. Very soon, a $6 trillion and then a 9 to 10 trillion economy. Of course, then the influence also increases because of the economic size of the economy. In addition, India's leadership among the global south, but also India's leadership because it's the most populous country in the world. It's the largest democracy in the world. The soft power of India is stronger and stronger. So I feel that this notion of a G2, China and the US, has been a correct one, but I'm now thinking more and more about the G3, where you have the US and you have China and you have India. So I think the coming decade is a decade of India. Indian leadership is incredibly important. It's a G3. And then, of course, in addition to this G3, you have all the European countries. So you could say that you are faced with the G4, but I would say G3 because Europe is several countries. That's why I coined this G3 notion. But I'm not forgetting the Europeans. They have been calling me a lot the last week and said, oh, what about us? And I said, yes, we could also add that, but these are separate sovereign countries. So of the big one sovereign countries, these are the G3s.
Amazing. Yes, the European bloc will have several countries. I also want to ask you, with the Chinese President Xi Jinping unlikely to attend the G20 with the Russian President Putin staying away, do you think any breakthrough which would be to the benefit of world economies can take place in this G20 summit?
Definitely. I think the G20 summit in New Delhi is incredibly important, and we need to agree on traffic rules. We have to revive growth, and we have to rebuild trust. And my understanding is if President Xi Jinping is not coming from China, it will be the premier. That's number two, the prime minister of China. We know that Mr. Putin didn't come to the G20 meeting in Indonesia either, not to the BRICS meeting. So I think this is still a very, very important meeting, and I'm quite bullish on the outcome, and the presidency has done an incredible job, being Prime Minister Modi himself, but also the G20 special envoy Amitabh Kant has shown incredible leadership, and I'm very impressed, I have to say.